that has to be enhanced. And this is accomplished through sur mirah, fasei tev, refraining from negative, and doing good. So b'meile, these are the two things, which is one is to cleanse and one is to enhance. So therefore, Eir and Yom goes together. So now the Rebbe explains what does this mean in the factual life. The difference between night and day is that also at night you have all the inyanim like in the daytime, which means a house that is that has the same things at night, the same things like it has in the daytime. The difference is we don't see them. And b'meila, a person stumbles, a person feels, a person's tapping, till he sees it. Which this is also the difference. The Rebbe connects it also, reflects it also in another inyan. The difference between Rishenim and Achreinim. By Rishenim we find, which are the original codifiers of the Jewish law and different responses, that their tshuvas, their responses are all short. A tshuva of a Rishen, the Rashba, the Rambam others, is shorter in comparison to the ones that followed in the next phase, which were the Achreinim, the later ones that came amongst the Jewish codifiers, amongst the codifiers of the Jewish law, were the later times called Achreinim, the last ones. So the Rebbe explains the difference is because the Rishenim were like a person, is like were in the sense of a person that is living in a lit up house, and when he needs something, he just walks over and takes it and has it in his hand. Mashenkin the Achreinim later generations in a darker time, so in order to clarify something, in order to be able to compile something and bring out a certain clarification, halacha, or answer questions, so therefore there was a need. They were in a situation of darkness, and therefore it took more time. And therefore, they go into more details in order to clarify it in a clearer way, in a clarified way, that it should be understood completely, and clarified also for themselves. And therefore, the Rishenim wrote in a shorter version, shorter format, because by them they were already right by the point, and there was no need to elaborate and discuss it and bring out controversies. On the other hand, the Achreinim, the later generation, since they were in a darker time, so therefore there was a need to go through all the different details and then come out with something sifted, something clear and final.
Whose mashal was that? Dark house in Elijah?
Whose
mashal was that? House that's dark?
I don't know where. I think it's a mashal. It could be a mashal that the Rebbe bases it on somebody earlier, but the Rebbe mentions it in a sikha 50 years ago. If I'm not mistaken, I think it is in Purim or one of the Fabrengens that the Rebbe mentions this mashal. And on this we say, Zman HaGolus, Golus, which is compared to darkness, night, so we say, we don't see miracles. And it doesn't mean that there's no miracles, that there are signs and miracles and wonders. It relates and it's a sign for the Jewish nation. Because in every generation, the enemies stand up against the Jewish nation, and the Eibishter saves him from them.
Isn't there a chazal that the miracle happens to a person who doesn't know it?
There's an expression, Ein Balanes Makir B'Nisei, that the Balanes himself doesn't realize, but there are miracles at all times, as the Rebbe Rashab says in a Maimer, that there are miracles b'chol yom v'yom, every day. And this he says in 1918, which in Russia was one of the tough times, when communism began and when there were different kinds of parties, the Reds and the others, and there was a lot of confusion. And the Yidden were the ones that suffered, the Jewish nation, people were suffering. They pulled people off the trains, they hit Yidden, they hurt Yidden, it was mamish of grave danger, to the extent that there was a consideration that the Rebbe Rashab is going to go to Israel. That's when they made the picture, the famous photo of the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, was in 1918. that they made that picture in his house, and there was a chassid, Rav Shmuel Garari, who was going to sponsor all the expenses. Later, the Rebbe Rashab retracted and said he's not going.
What was the picture for?
Passport. So, b'meila, ela she'esis im beifan shalirei meisam. The aces are in a way that we don't see them. Mashenkin b'mayim the matzav shalir v'yem shalzrei makirim anis. Mashenkin, when we speak about the situation of light and day, so then a person is able to see and acknowledge the nisim. In other words, a person could sometimes see it and not realize it's a miracle. In other words, he might say, who says it's a miracle? It could be natural. B'meila, the word is makirim, that it's in such a revealed way that he acknowledges, he recognizes and acknowledges that it is a miracle. So the Rebbe says in this itself there are two formats. Omnam bazeh gufa yeshnam bezi fanim, two formats. Eifan Aleph, one format is shaleireya ma'esis legamri. We don't see the signs at all. Kemaimer azal al filo balanes in emake benise. That even the balanes, the person himself, does not realize in his miracle. Which means the person with whom the miracle took place does not realize it. Al derech, like the Rebbe mentioned 40 years ago, when we were speaking about the shchuna, the neighborhood. And the Rebbe was speaking then about bolstering and strengthening the shchuna. This is 40 years ago. The Rebbe started to speak about it in Acharon Shel Pesach, the last day of Pesach, Tovshin Chavtes, 1969, 40 years ago. 2009 minus 40. And that was already a time that some people moved out, but the Rebbe saved the situation, and whoever was left, and some came back, especially Babich Chassidim moved back into Crown Heights, and it was a legend for other neighborhoods also. So the Rebbe then spoke about a certain union that took place in court, and the Rebbe said they came late to court. And the Rebbe said still there was a miracle from the previous Rebbe. The Rebbe referred it to the Frierdiker Rebbe, that there was a miracle that they were successful in court. So the Rebbe says when it comes to other Chassidim like to hear miracles. Chabad, the Rebbe says, could show a bigger miracle yet. That even although they hear there's a miracle, they can later sit down without any conscience and sit down and eat kugel. Like nothing happened. In other words, the Rebbe is saying it's like, no, it didn't really shake them up. The Rebbe said, this is a bigger mephis yet. They can sit down later and eat kugel like nothing happened. It never got them off the ground. So the Rebbe says, this is a miracle that happened, but it was afila balanes in emake benise. The one that the miracle happened to then in court 40 years ago, they themselves didn't realize what was taking place. That this itself was a miracle. So this is one way that they don't see the miracle. They don't see it at all. They don't realize there was a miracle. The Eifan Abe is the second format. They see the miracle as the miracle is enclosed in nature, which means that although they look at the nature, they realize that it's a miracle. Which one of the examples for that is benegir to the union of Purim. By Purim we find, the Rebbe says, that on one hand Esther came to the Melech, and she wasn't asked to come for 30 days. And if she comes without permission, she's putting herself in danger. Esther put herself in danger. Still, she came to the king, and she came to the king, and she risked her life. And the king saw her, so he extended the royal cane to her, and then she started to roll with the schedule. One party, and then another party, and then this brought the downfall of Haman. So the Rebbe says that although the Cheder, it seems very natural, she found favor in his eyes, he found charm in his eyes, and Memela, he put out he extended his cane, a royal rad. So the Rebbe says, a person that is fasting 3 days and 3 nights, which means didn't eat for 3 days and 3 nights, not that they ate and they fasted the next day. B'meila, the Rebbe says, what could a person look like already? And the Rebbe says, what happened over here? Esther fasted with Tzumah Alai 3 days, 3 nights. Then she comes to find Chen by Bebeine HaMelech. And we're not talking about a person who was, per se, a very balanced person. We're talking about Achashverosh, that according to one day he was a tipish, a foolish king. And B'meila, by him, everything is external. And when he looks at the external, a person that comes after 3 days looks like she's passing out.